Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Hasher and I'm an occupational therapy assistant and I am currently in a full-time master's program that is transitioning me over from a CODA to an OTR, which is the registered occupational therapist. So I just wanted to start with talking a little bit about what OT is. There's a lot of misconceptions about how we just work in certain areas or we just work on certain things. A lot of people associate us with hand therapy or working on the upper extremities solely, but the truth is we can work in a variety of different settings, and what we actually do is help anyone with any sort of disability live the life that they want to live by doing the things that are most important to themselves. So we do this by finding ways to adapt or modify their daily routine so that they're able to function fully in whatever sort of occupation that they want to do. So I specifically wanted to go over really quick what fine motor skills are, and we use them pretty often. Almost every activity that we do on our day-to-day basis involves fine motor skills. When you think about cutting, coloring, any sort of writing, if you play a musical instrument, every time we're cooking and cutting items for our recipes, we're using fine motor skills. And those are movements and muscles within our hands. And they're smaller movements, but they're really important to participating fully and effectively in our day-to-day activities. There's no one thing that everyone should be doing to help build and expand on their fine motor skills, but one thing that I wanted to touch base on is the idea of proximal stability offers distal mobility. And what this means is that we need to strengthen our bigger muscles and our more solid centered muscles, which will in turn help build our fine motor muscles. And we could do that by doing any sort of games, exercising, playing outside, weight bearing activities, jumping, any sort of things like that that build our bigger muscles within our body are going to help strengthen our finer motor muscles. Another aspect that can help build our fine motor skills is something called crossing midline. And what midline is the center part of your body where both the left and right side of your brain meet right in the middle. So developmentally, children at a young age often just work on one side of their body and on the other side of the body, and they tend to not really work crossing that midline. So performing activities that include reaching for toys across one side of their body, even there's a lot of opportunities during bath time to teach bathing themselves on the opposite side of their body. Those activities can increase fine motor skills. Another component that can help build our fine motor skills actually coincides with the crossing of midline, and it's called bilateral coordination. And what bilateral coordination means is coordinating one side of your body to move in conjunction with the other side of your body, even when they're both not doing the same necessary action. So for example, you might see your toddler using one hand to perform an action while the opposite hand is stabilized and not really doing much of anything. So any sort of opportunity to get them to include holding that item still or washing their hands with both hands instead of one side. A lot of opportunities like that can assist in building our fine motor skills. For the purpose of my 2 videos and for my capstone project, I'm going to hone in on 3 fine motor skills that are commonly seen and practiced within the school setting. So it's pre-writing, cutting, and coloring. As I go through some of the stuff I want you to take a look at as you work with your child this week, I do want to say that just because I'm pointing out some of these problems or incorrect ways to do things does not mean there's an issue necessarily with your child. Developmentally, they could just be at one spot and they're working their way to getting to the end result. And often there's a process and a sequence which they need to follow for them to reach that end process. So if you're noticing anything incorrect going on, it does not mean necessarily that your child needs occupational therapy or any sort of intervention. It could just mean that, you know, they're discovering and learning and experiencing life as it happens, and they're learning themselves how to eventually get to the end result. But I'll just show you some ways how we can help facilitate and prevent bad habits moving forward. As your child is doing any sort of pre-writing activity in the following week, I want you to pay attention to how they're holding whatever writing manipulative that they're using. So whether it's a marker or a pencil, just take a peek at how they're holding it. So some incorrect grasps that you might notice are they're holding it like this, or in something we call a downward pronated grasp, and they're coloring this way or writing this way. Same with this type of grasp pattern. And what we want to do is facilitate tucking these two fingers back, moving the fingers down to the end of the writing manipulative, and creating an open web space, and just ensuring that this sits back in that open web space, like so. You might also see them trying to color or write from up here, and the same thing, we're just going to move it on down, like so. Another thing I want you to focus on as your child's performing any sort of pre-writing activity is where the movement is coming from as they make their pre-writing lines or letters, anything like that. And what I mean by that is, are they using their fingers to make the letter or shape or line, or is the movement coming from a grosser motor movement, such as their shoulder, their forearm, or even their wrist? And like I said, this doesn't necessarily mean there's an issue. Maybe they're just young and developmentally not at that point yet where they can make those finer motor movements and have fine motor control, but it's just something to keep an eye out on. The next fine motor skill I wanted to touch base about is cutting. Often children are holding their scissors wrong. So this week, as your child is performing any sort of cutting activity, maybe ensure that they're holding their scissors properly, because this will make all the difference. And what I mean by that is make sure their thumb is going in the small hole, and then 2. Sometimes they're going to want 3 fingers in that hole. Try to just make it 3 altogether. Their arm should be right to their side against their rib cage, and I often use the verbal cue and verbal reminder to have their thumb up to the sky. So thumbs up to the sky as we're cutting, and try to get their elbow to the side. And this is our helper hand that's going to help turn the page or move it as we need to cut. Just so you know, straight lines are going to be the easiest to start with to cut. And then as we get to more of those curvy lines or shapes such as a circle, there's a lot of bilateral coordination in which we have to turn our opposite hand while our other hand is doing another activity. So this is going to get a little bit more challenging. So the last fine motor skill I wanted to have you guys focus on for this week as you're working with your child is coloring. And one suggestion I wanted to make to you guys is possibly consider breaking your crayons in half. And I know it sounds kind of silly, and if you just bought a new box of crayons, maybe it sounds harsh, but it's going to get rid of those gross grasp patterns or the weak patterns that I had shown you before, where they're grabbing it with all their fingers or facing it downward. If you break the crayon in half, it's making it smaller and forcing them to grab it with less fingers. You're going to see a lot more of a functional grasp pattern if you have smaller crayons than if you're using a full-length crayon. Okay, so those are the 3 skills I want you guys to practice this week with your kids. Just look for those natural occurring opportunities if they're coloring one night or trying to cut something. just check out and see how they're doing. I'm going to put together a packet for you guys that you can download in case there's not a lot to cut at home or color at home. I'm just going to put together a couple pieces of paper for you and have that ready for you in case you want to print it out and practice with what I've given you. I also wanted to point out that our next video is going to be focusing on the same skills, but instead of giving you the same sort of initial basics about the skills, I'm going to reinforce and give you opportunities to adapt and modify those 3 fine motor skills next week. And there'll be simple ways, hopefully, that you can already incorporate at home if your child's having a challenging time with these 3 fine motor skills. Thank you so much for watching my video. I think it's a great opportunity for me personally to help people at home during a time where people are home now more than ever, and I just think it's a great time to start something like this. So thank you so much. I hope you learned something, and I hope you're looking forward to my next video next week. Have a great day.